And welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast of Jackson and Kyle. I am Jackson, and I'm joined here, as always, by the man who is currently not watching any Boston sports media right now. Kyle, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, obviously, as not a Celtics fan, that's rough. But hey, the Red Sox are back, so we're okay. Next sport.
Are the Red Sox back? Well, I haven't been keeping up too close.
They're on a bit of a roll right now. They picked up their first series win against a team over 500 against
Okay,
the
there you go.
Phillies, and then beat the Yankees 2 out of 3. So maybe things are working out. We'll see.
Okay, well, yeah, on to the next sport. Yeah, finally Boston ended their nearly 6-year championship drought. It had been tough for Boston fans.
Yeah, I can imagine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not having that opportunity, but I think everybody was doing okay there. I think that they're still spoiled. So
Yeah,
it's been a
yeah.
fun ride.
I can say there as if you don't root for 3 out of the 4 teams in
I know,
Boston.
right? I know, exactly. So I'm still on a drought. That's my problem.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Kyle, we were on a drought as no podcast last week, and then we had to do a weird time. So thanks to everyone who's able to check us out live, and apologies to everyone who is maybe watching this tomorrow, realizing that we were actually recording on Tuesday. It's kind of a whole thing where I forgot I had something I had to do on Wednesday, and then last week I was sick. So it's been a a lot of work and a lot of moving parts here, but we're happy to be back talking most important players NFC edition. This is a fun show we did 2 weeks ago. And yeah, so if you missed it then, basically the way we do it is we're picking a player for each team that we're considering the most important. And this doesn't necessarily mean it's not like if you take them out of the team who would get hurt the most. It's more so, who has the biggest swing, or maybe if they reach their potential could help out the team the most, but if they don't reach their potential could hurt the team the most. That's kind of how we view this. And we try to not pick quarterbacks unless we can't pick anyone else, just to make it a little bit more interesting. Yeah, this seems like I covered it, Kyle.
Yeah, I think so. So basically, what we're trying to say for this team to meet their expectations, this player has to perform the best. So like last time we did this was the AFC. We said we kind of know Patrick Mahomes going to be good. Like Patrick Mahomes, like meeting expectations isn't the most important thing. It was somebody else meeting expectations for this team to reach its ceiling. So it's kind of a similar vein. Sometimes that is the quarterback, and sometimes it's not. So that's kind of how we break it down.
Yeah, so I think that answers the question in the chat. So we can just get right into it. Let's start off with the Dallas Cowboys, the team that everyone loves to talk about in the offseason. The offseason really is the Cowboys season.
Yeah. Although they've been pretty quiet, it feels like, in free agency and such lately. Like there's not a bunch of huge splashes. So, it was pretty quiet for them for the most part. But, this is where they got to get the preseason, they got to get the Cowboys media mafia going to turn this into a team that can compete for a Super Bowl. It gets everybody to buy in and gets everyone to get all excited again. And we get stuck back at the same situation in January over and over.
Yeah. And again, just to clarify once more exactly how this works, it's not the best player. It is the player who is the most important to their team this upcoming season. So if they bust, who would hurt them the most? If they succeed, who would help them the most? I am going a guy who was really good a couple years ago. Was an All-Pro 3 years ago, despite how giving up the most yards in football. I'm going Trayvon Diggs. I think Trayvon Diggs is someone who is really important heading into the 2024 season. As someone who, we've seen him. I thought 2 years ago was actually like really good. Like he actually became a good cover corner and was still making the splash plays. Then last year gets injured. They didn't really miss a beat. But now that there's that whole roster spot opening, and I'm assuming they're going Deron Bland on one side and Diggs on the other. What are we going to see out of Diggs?
Yeah, he was also on my list. I couldn't decide between him and Deron Bland, but I kind of look at both of them in the same vein, where I think the big thing with both of these guys is both of these guys are kind of feast or famine corners, right? That's kind of their thing. They're high variance players as it is at maybe the most high variance position in football. And they're going to be, I think at least when you had Diggs and when you had Bland, you at least said like Stephon Gilmore gives you a baseline on the other side, right? Like he's going to be solid and he's going to do his job, that kind of thing. You at least had that in your back pocket. Now you have both of these guys, and I think there's going to be a couple games where maybe they each get an interception. They could have some big games, big turnover days, but I also think there's a couple days where they can get torched. And I think it could come down to, can they do it consistently enough, and can they do it in the biggest games? I think that's going to be the biggest part of this Cowboys season, especially this defense getting back to what it was last year.
Keyran in the chat saying, "Damn it, Jackson fixed Kyle's light. I'm struggling to see his glowing face." I feel like I can see Kyle's face fine. I think it's I don't think it's. I think you look great, Kyle.
Thank you. I feel pretty plenty bright enough. I also shave, so I feel brighter as it is. So
okay,
a lot going on here.
Yeah, but who did you put for the Cowboys?
I ended up going Diggs, but I think Bland would also. I have a case for Bland too, for a similar situation.
Yeah, really, I mean, I was trying to think of who else you could even put. I guess you maybe try to go with another receiver because like the depth is a bit of a concern there. Like that's another aspect.
Well, I was thinking like, could you put Tyler Guyton? But this team also kind of knows how to play without Tyron Smith anyways, because he wasn't in so much.
Right.
I think it's going to be a good offensive line either way. You could bring up like Chauncey Golston or someone on the defensive line because this run defense was pretty bad last year, and that's probably its biggest like fix. I think that would probably be the other case, or you like someone like Eric Kendricks in the middle. Does he help fix that?
Yeah. Either way, should be interesting. They'll be a playoff team.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they win the division again. I think they could be that good. Like, it's not going to be that surprising. I don't know if they're going to win the Super Bowl. That seems like a huge step that they haven't got to.
Well, let's go to a team that got to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, Philadelphia Eagles, who had a very disappointing year last season. Kyle, I'll let you go first here. Who did you pick?
Yeah, another one pretty interesting because I feel like you could go in a lot of different directions with this team. I ended up going with Cam Jurgens, who is currently slated to be the starting center for the Eagles this next season. Look, I mean, when people say, is Jason Kelce the best center ever? Like, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think he's popular, and I mean, he seems incredibly likable, so I understand why he's popular. But he is also really damn good, right? Like, and I think he was a big part of why their offense worked the way it did, is because he is this, kind of, it's stealing an NBA term. It's kind of the unicorn style center. His athleticism, you don't typically look for that kind of size for an offensive lineman, but his athleticism and his ability to block, shed blocks, and get up to second level, that kind of stuff really made this run offense work the way that it did. And also just how low he got on those, QB sneaks too. It's almost just as important as Jalen Hurts. So does this work as well without Jason Kelce? I think that's a big thing because, I think he might have been the most important player on that offensive line. So I think that could be important.
That's a good one. It is. I guess I'm not going there. I think the Eagles' offensive line will still be very good, even if they. I agree. I think he's important. It's tough because I struggle with the Eagles, to be honest, picking one because I don't think there's a corner makes sense. That feels like their biggest, most important position. But which guy do you choose there? Because they added Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper to John, plus maybe James Bradbury and Darius Slay are good next year. So it's how do you do that? Someone actually in the chat said my pick. I went with Saquon Barkley because it's the kind of thing where it's I'm viewing if you hit your upside, if Barkley is prime Saquon Barkley with the Eagles, I do think that could really move the needle.
Yeah. I mean, if you get a tier 1 running back in this offense, it would be special. It would. And I think that this offense at minimum should be pretty good. Just because of the things they can do running the football, what Jalen Hurts provides, and, the receivers they have, I think it should be at minimum pretty good. And it could be great if everything kind of clicks and works as it goes. And I agree with you. I think Saquon was on my, list of guys I thought about picking. I thought about Quinyon Mitchell too. I even thought about Devin White. If you get not a bounce back, if you get a retro Devin White season from his rookie year, this was one of the worst linebacker rooms in the league last year. So I think there's a bunch of different interesting players you could put in that conversation. But yeah, I mean, I think Saquon would be my number 2 as well. And I definitely think it's an interesting pickup. And, they paid him the money for a reason because it could be really important.
Yeah. Another guy I thought about as well that you didn't mention was what about what about Jalen Carter? Like not in the sense
Mhm.
like he'll be good, but like, what if like, could he take the next step and be like a Chris Jones? Like that could change things.
It's really interesting because there is all the memes about the Eagles basically taking, that they always get graded well in the drafts because they pick all the players we know.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, this is kind of the year where those guys have to, you kind of have to reap the benefits, right? Because in theory, like I was looking at ESPN's depth chart here, you are potentially playing Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Jeremiah Trotter, Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, like all of those guys might play or be really important for this team.
Even
Like
Nakobe Dean could end up getting a good amount of snaps.
Nakobe Dean too, yeah. So I mean, I think all of those guys are going to be really interesting to see if they can, we praise all of these draft rooms, and I think they deserve their praise because I did like those picks at the time. I'm not going to retroactively say I didn't like the Eagles drafts all along, but now they kind of have to play in the NFL, right? And we have to see it kind of work out for them. And, especially when I look at that linebacker room, it's like Dean and Smith together. That's a really small linebacker room. And I'm just curious to see how this is all going to work and how this defense is going to look.
Yeah, should be fascinating. Plenty of question marks, but plenty of potential answers as well. Let's move to another team with plenty of question marks, the New York Giants. I'll go first. I just went Malik Neighbors. I just
Mhm.
figured, you know what? If he can come through and hit and be a great receiver for them, I don't think that moves the needle enough for them to be a playoff team, in my opinion. But like that, at least like makes them a lot more interesting.
Yeah. We've done the Giants thing so many times. This was such an easy pick for me. And I feel bad for making it this easy of a pick. But, like, how many times can we say this team sucks at receiver? Like,
Hmm.
we've just said it over and over and over again. This has been one of the worst receiver situations basically since Odell's injury stuff. Um, and I just don't think anything else matters at this point. We know who Daniel Jones is, so I can't really say Daniel Jones. It's not a make or break season for Daniel Jones.
Hmm.
The Tommy DeVito hype train has died. Um, maybe you get a bounce
What?
back
When
Evan
did this
Neal.
happen?
Yeah, I
No,
know.
train's still going strong.
It's still going strong.
Hmm.
Maybe Evan Neal has a bounce back season, but like, how much does that really move anything for you? I don't know.
Again, I have to say, I
Um,
think you're using the term bounce back incorrectly here on this podcast. You have to
okay,
be good at some point for you to bounce back.
leap season. Devin White was good his rookie year.
Yeah, he made
He
some
was,
good plays.
he was
He was better than he is now.
yes.
Hmm.
Okay, turnaround season. That's what I mean.
Yes.
So yeah,
Live up to his potential.
yes, he needs to do that this year.
He wants to
But
bounce
yeah, I
back
mean,
again.
I know I did. It is all up to Malik Neighbors. But yeah, I mean, you want to see the flashes from this kid. You drafted him that highly. I think he is super talented. And yeah, you want to see those flashes that you can something to get excited about. Someone you could put on jerseys because I mean, just look at this team. Like, how many guys are you really excited about for this team? Dexter Lawrence,
Hmm.
um, maybe Kayvon Thibodeau, and that was a guy who I also had on this list. I had him as an honorable mention for this one because, like, I think we've seen the flashes from Kayvon Thibodeau. We haven't seen the really kind of full package. Outside of
Hmm.
that, it's not much.
They added Brian Burns. I mean, the defensive line is going to be pretty good, I would think, if Thibodeau does in fact play well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it should
I hated
be,
the
and
Brian Burns contract, but like he's a good player.
yeah, yeah. I mean, him and Thibodeau should be good. Even guys like Okereke, I think, are good. I mean, there's a couple good players here. I just don't know how much it really. I don't know how excited I am about this team just from top to bottom.
Andrew Thomas is good.
Yeah, but you know,
It's
no
tough.
one's
You're right.
bought, no one's tuning in to watch Andrew Thomas.
Wandale Robinson showed some flashes. Isaiah Hodgins has had some moments. Go on, Kyle. There's plenty of talent here. Drew
Okay.
Lock.
All right. So you're gonna pick them to win the NFC East?
We'll see. We'll see. I haven't made up my mind. Let's move on. Let's finish the NFC East. Let's talk some balls, Kyle. Where did you go with the Washington Commanders?
This one, one of the few rookies I did pick again, or one of the few quarterbacks I did pick, and this is also a rookie, so it's back-to-back rookies for me here. And Yeah, I mean, it's Jaden Daniels. I mean, he is the future of the franchise, so I think that's the most important part. And not to mention, like, they have tried to like add a lot of pieces to this team. Like, if you look at this offense, you got Austin Eckler, you bring him in, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. We've liked this receiver room. There's flashes, there's interesting players there for sure. Um, Zach Ertz is in here. Like, it's not crazy to think that this offense could be pretty good next season if Jaden Daniels is good. But Jaden Daniels has to be good. So, and it's the future of the franchise is hanging on it. And, so they've added some pieces. They added some linebackers. I think there's some interesting players here. I still feel like the secondary is a problem, and that would probably be my other position of interest. But it's still all about Daniels for this season.
Yeah, I couldn't really think of anyone else. I put Daniels as well. I didn't really have any other like potential options really. Like I thought about like maybe Emmanuel Forbes, but I'm kind of like, even if he hits, I still think the secondary is going to stink. So like I don't think that's actually like, moving the needle that much. Yeah, I mean it's all about, it's already like for every team with rookie quarterback, that's really all that's going to matter. But especially for a team like Washington, that's just I don't think that there's too much else Commanders fans are hoping for other than Daniels hitting.
Yeah, if Emmanuel Forbes is good and Jaden Daniels is bad, Commanders are pretty bad next year.
Right. Yeah, I think so. Granted, I think if Daniels is good and Forbes is bad, I think the Commanders are also still pretty bad next year.
Yeah. I don't know. Could you it's not crazy to say if this is like a top 15 offense next year if Daniels hits, right?
True, but I think that a top 15 offense and like a bottom 7 defense still doesn't get, honestly, might be bottom 1 defense. I mean, I think the defense does not look great.
Yeah. You're not buying into the Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner pickups?
Up the middle, it's good. The Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, that's good. They'll stop the run.
Yeah. It's quite the zag, isn't it? Like everyone's saying edge rushers and corners are like the most important positions. They just said, screw that.
Yeah, we're going all linebackers and interior defensive linemen. Well, I mean, hey, they, at least, I'll say this. Brandon Staley said, all I care about is secondary, and then had a bad secondary. At least they've gotten good at the thing they're trying to be good at.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that's fair.
All right. Well, let's move on. Let's go to the Detroit Lions, a team that was so close to playing in the Super Bowl last year. So I'll go first with them. I went Terrion Arnold for them, the corner they just drafted, another rookie here. So I'm going 3 straight rookies. I think that there's a lot of hope. And honestly, I don't think Arnold has to hit for this team to be successful. There is other, options at the corner position. But I do think if he does hit, that could really change things. Getting another really good outside corner. I expect Carlton Davis to be solid. So, he's the guy I went with. There's, I think, several other places you could go. But, Kyle, where did you go?
I went with Carlton Davis because I still think he's a good player, and you're probably saying, well, he's going to be good out of the way. But I just think they invested so much in starting the number 1 corner last year, and Cam Sutton didn't work out, that I think they kind of need this to hit, because we saw what this team already was at its baseline, which is a pretty darn good football team, right? But I think for this team to reach the next level, it's going to come down to that number 1 corner spot and how they match up with top level receivers. I think, at least. And this team defended the run pretty well. They have good pass rushers. We know what this offense can be. We've seen so many defenses, at least, at the end of the day, a good offense is going to scheme against a bad corner. I agree. And that's probably the worry you have with, it's either Terrion Arnold or, Ennis Rakestraw too. That would probably be your worry. But at the same time, we've seen good defenses hide bad corners, at least a little bit. But they have to have a good corner on the other side. And I think Detroit could do that if they're able to have it hit with Carlton Davis. And, this is probably the difference. I think he's the difference between this team winning the Super Bowl or having a year a lot like last year.
Yeah, I mean, because you think about last year, they were so close to making the Super Bowl. We also kind of collectively forget, though, that they were also so close to being out round 1. That Rams game was really like a coin flip game, and I think you could argue the Rams outplayed the Lions a little bit in that one. But Lions made the play when they had to, got the win. But I think a big part of it was they've been a team that you can throw on, and getting that secondary cleared up is going to be really important. You could also maybe look at is there another edge rusher you want to step up? But I couldn't really nail one down. Let me throw another guy I thought I thought about here. What about Jameson Williams? Like he's someone
Yeah.
that I'm interested in. He's shown the flashes. We've really like his highlights are still great, but like we just haven't seen consistently. If he could live up to his college potential, like that would really change things.
Yeah, he was my second pick. He was my honorable mention, and I was just looking at him like I if he ends up hitting like we kind of hoped, and we were both really high on him in college, and obviously between the suspensions and the injury, it hasn't quite hit for him yet. If he begins to hit and turns it around, like how do you stop this offense?
Yeah, I mean, you can't stop them already. So, like, adding this, like, the one thing you could say is, like, well, do they have, like, a great outside guy? Like, and I thought Williams had moments where he won on the outside. Another thing
Yeah,
that was him and Goff don't really have great chemistry. I'm not sure. Like, that's another kind of underrated aspect. I feel like there was a lot of, I'm actually making a film study on him, so I was kind of looking at that. But, there's hope, though, is the thing.
yeah, I agree with that, and I think also him missing so much time would play a part in that too. So,
Yeah.
if he's able to consistently get on the field, like that offense becomes unstoppable almost. But at the same time, like I think at the baseline, it's going to be very, very good, regardless. So that's why I didn't pick it. And that's why I went secondary first. Because I mean, I just think this was a good run defense as it was last year. And they had DJ Reader. Marcus Davenport probably isn't what he is at his peak, but he was pretty good before getting hurt with Minnesota last season. I thought he was solid. I think they got some interesting pieces here for sure in the front seven. It just comes down to this secondary. I think that's the biggest thing that's going to separate this team against the top level teams.
Yeah. Let's move on. Let's go to the Packers, who, another team that the way we're close to getting to the conference championship. They also, another team that thought they maybe were going to beat the 49ers and weren't quite able to do it. Where'd you go here, Kyle?
Man, I'm still kind of struggling with this one. I ended up just going back to receiver. I still think it's too important a position for them. And it turned around last season. Jordan Love had a fantastic second half of the year. We talked about that ad nauseum, I think. But still, I still watch this team and think I really want one of these guys to turn into a number one guy. And, Romeo Doubs has shown some flashes. Jaden Reed showed some flashes. I still think Christian Watson at his best is the most talented of the group, and I went with Christian Watson. It's kind of the make or break year for him, man. Like, we need to see you on the field, and we need to see you playing, and we need to see you being productive consistently. And I think he has the talent in him. I've been, incredibly high on him since the draft. I'm still high on him. And I think when he's been on the field, he's looked electric. He's at almost 15 yards a catch for his career, 12 touchdowns in 23 games. I think that's some really good stuff. We just need to see it more often. We need to see it consistently, and I think he has that opportunity this year.
Yeah, and there even have been moments where he's been on the field but hasn't really been able to show up certain times. But definitely the injuries has been the biggest issue with him. It's kind of similar to the Jameson Williams thing, right? It's almost the exact same thing of like the Packers. Yeah. The difference is the Lions have Amon-Ra St. Brown, so they have like that elite slot guy. But the Packers have weapons, right? Like Jaden Reed, I thought was really good as a rookie. Dontavian Wicks and like Romeo Doubs are like good. Like they're essentially like just a group of number two wide receivers. But you're right. Sometimes you need that number one guy. Like maybe if Christian Watson did live up to his potential and was in that conference championship game, maybe they win it. I don't know. But I stuck with offense. I just went Jordan Morgan, who probably will play, I believe, guard is where he's probably going to line up. Wasn't someone I was overly high on coming into the draft. A lot of people felt like that was a reach. Can he just live up to it, be a solid guard for them? It's interesting. I mean, the Packers don't really have one clear player that you look at and say they really need to step up.
Yeah. I still think part of it is like just we see the Green Bay logo on and we say, oh, good offensive line kind of thing. Like, that's just kind of what we lean on, but I kind of just lean on like they're going to figure it out. I don't love some of the players here, but I think there's enough pretty good players in this group. And it just comes down to like, it feels like it's weird because like you have Love who had those moments and had that real, star-like run the second half of the year. You get a guy in Josh Jacobs who's an expensive running back and also very good at his best. And it just kind of feels like a bunch of okay players beyond that. Like, I don't think any of these guys at any of the receiver positions, tight end, any of the offensive line positions, I don't see any of them as like a real major weakness, but I don't know if I view any of those guys as strengths either. And I think that's the question is like, if a couple of these young guys on this team can take leaps, like, and you start to develop some strengths from those positions, then I think this team really takes off.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Another guy throw out there. What about Jair Alexander? Another guy who didn't stay fully healthy last year, but at his best is still a star corner, and then showed flashes last year of being that star corner again. Getting a lockdown number one corner could be helpful.
Yeah, I thought about him as well. I mean, the tough thing for me with this defense is like I felt like I could have named like 7 defensive players.
Yeah.
And that's just because this team has been so below its expectations defensively the last couple of years. I still think a lot of it is just coming down. Like the correct answer for this team is probably Jeff Hafley, right? The new defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Because that might be like the cop out answer is he's the most important person, the piece, because you're banking on a bunch of internal progression because you bring in a new coach. And I think that's the interesting part of it.
Yeah. Going to Minnesota now, the Minnesota Vikings were another team that, I mean, again, I could easily go JJ McCarthy just because, like, same thing we always talk about, rookie quarterback. I tried to only pick a quarterback if I couldn't think of another answer. I could think of another answer. I decided to go Dallas Turner. It's a scheme that is so dependent on blitzing and rushing the passer. So having a guy to try and replace a really good pass rusher, I think could be really important. So I decided to go with him. Obviously, McCarthy's the real answer, but my official answer is Dallas Turner.
Yeah, I did agree with that because I agree with you in a similar vein. I also don't know if it's guaranteed McCarthy is going to start right away. I think he is going to play a lot this season just because I'm not a Sam Darnold guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't know if he's going to play right away, and it hasn't been guaranteed. So I tried to avoid that unless I thought the quarterback wasn't that going to play. But similar vein, I agree with what you said. I just went Jonathan Grenard. I just think he's the best player of that group, and he has to replace a very good player. I mean, I think, you would always be able to talk about Danielle Hunter, advanced stats versus counting stats guy, but I still think he's good. Like, it's not like it's not like advanced stats say he's bad. They're just not saying he's great, as his counting stats would provide. And they need a good player on that edge spot. So I went with Grenard because I think he has the highest upside. And, I agree, Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, it's very much a, to quote Moneyball again, I feel like I've done that a lot on this podcast lately. It's replacing Hunter in the aggregate. You got 3 guys for the price of one. A couple of these 3 guys combined have to replace your one guy.
Yeah. I agree. I think that's fair. And I think that, I don't know how well it'll go. And I just think why I decided to go Turner, even though we're both kind of thinking the same thing. I feel like I'm expecting Grenard to be pretty good. I know he's, going from team to team, but I feel like edge rushers, they tend to be pretty like team independent. Like linemen in general, offensive or defensive linemen, tend to be like, if you're good on one scheme, like, okay, the schemes are different, but they're not that different unless you're going like as an offensive lineman, like from Tampa Bay to San Francisco or something like that.
Yeah. I guess unless you're playing with like TJ Watt, right? Like, how many times have we, like, the Bud Duprees of the world just all of a sudden go to another team and it's like, oh, that's not a very good player.
Yeah, I guess that's, but also I think, again, look at like that's fair. You're right. Going from a great situation to that might be the more important way to look at it. Or just if you're one of those guys who had 10 sacks but wasn't actually good.
Yeah, that would be fair. The thing is, like, it's a weird team because everything you kind of just laid out with this team, like, I don't love the pieces in this secondary, but I also think this is kind of the scheme that isn't really individual secondary player dependent, right? Because their goal is to just get to the quarterback as quickly as they can. They just throw everyone at you. So, a lot of it is, it's kind of a weird thing where we say secondary. That's the most important. But this is really the team where it's not the case.
Yeah, or it might be, and then they're screwed. But they're not. There's not one player that is going to change that. So either way, that's how they're built.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I do trust Brian Flores as a defensive coordinator, so could work out.
Where'd you go with the Chicago Bears?
Caleb.
Yeah,
the cop out one. I mean, look, like they clearly. I mean, I have to give a ton of credit to this team, honestly, because they looked at this situation, it was at the point in January where people like, should they keep Justin Fields? And not only did they not keep Justin Fields, they basically said, we are going all in on this 5-year window. I mean, look at this team now compared to what it was a couple years ago, where we said Fields has the worst supporting cast in the league. And now all of a sudden we have DeAndre Swift, I don't think he's fantastic, but he's, a passable starting running back. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, who you drafted this year, Cole Kmet. You drafted Darnell Wright last year and he looked pretty good. It's still a little bit of a shaky offensive line. I think that's probably the other position you can go to. But then all of a sudden this defense that played really well last year, and you added Montez Sweat mid-year. And, all of a sudden this is a team that looks like it's ready to go on a run this next few years if Caleb hits. And that's the most important thing.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Caleb Williams is the most important player for this team. He wasn't my pick, but we'll stick with him now. When's the last time we've seen a quarterback come in and be in as good of a situation like this? And I'm not counting I guess you could say Trey Lance with the, he was drafted 3rd overall, and then obviously Brock Purdy. But this is a very, I feel like Baker Mayfield came into a pretty good situation with the Browns. But we always talk about how much situation matters. We can't say after this year, well, look at who Caleb Williams had to throw to. What was he supposed to do? Unless there's a million injuries.
Well, not only that, they made a commitment to get better this offseason. And I mean, I hate to do it, but it also just stressed how incredible this trade was that got him the number one. They landed the number one pick the year after trading out of the number one pick and got a significantly better quarterback prospect. If Caleb Williams was in that draft, they're not trading the number one pick.
Right.
And the fact that they were comfortable with trading out of that pick to then get a better quarterback prospect and get more haul, it's an incredible achievement. And it allowed them to kind of gear up, and they had these additional assets and they packaged it all to go all in with this team. And like I said, I mean, they geared up for this 5-year window, and now they have it here.
Is this the thing where it's for the Bears, Bears fans in general, it's always been, why did you do this? Oh, you guys are so dumb. The Patrick Mahomes thing, right? Why didn't you draft Patrick Mahomes instead of Mitchell Trubisky? Is this how it had to happen? Is they had to get someone else to make the dumb decision, and there could be a passing of the torch? So now it's Panthers. What were you doing?
Yeah, you have to find a team somehow dumber than you for a change. I mean, honestly, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if Caleb hits to everybody's expectations and he is that good, and this team wins in this 5-year window, this is the biggest, most lopsided trade in NFL history, right? It has to take that point. I know everyone brings up the Herschel Walker thing, but this is going to define, especially if he's better than Bryce Young in year 1 and on that track, and that's a huge gap. This is defining the next 5 to 10 years of each of these franchises in a major, major way.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it certainly has that. It certainly has that potential. At least when you look back, when the Chiefs traded up for Patrick Mahomes, they traded with the Bills, who then used those picks to get Josh Allen. That kind of worked out for both teams. This is. I mean, I think when you trade. Right now, just again, not to do this every podcast, but the Panthers are currently looking at potentially having drafted a bust quarterback right before a really good quarterback prospect who got MVP votes in year 1. And then the pick that they gave up next year is being used on a great quarterback prospect. Still, who knows? Quarterback prospects are just quarterback prospects, but it's looking pretty good for the Bears and pretty rough for the Panthers.
Yeah. Just wild. But anyway, that's my case. Who'd you pick?
I want Tyreek Stevenson. I think that the defense is something that's kind of been overlooked a little bit. And, I think Kyler Gordon will probably be more of a slot guy, I'm assuming. Jalen Johnson on the outside. I think Tyreek Stevenson, if you can get a good year out of him, as young player who could, I think has shown flashes, despite maybe not having the consistency. We always talk about how much coverage matters. I think in this scheme, coverage definitely matters. I think that could be really important.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think you could also argue Kevin Byard. It's another guy who kind of had a down year last year. Comes into this situation. They had a pretty good secondary last year, and you're hoping that these pieces can make it even better. But yeah, I mean, those are definitely worthy picks. I think the one thing is you have debatably the best corner in football, if not the second best corner in football, and that's just something that I at least think that's just such a huge advantage right now. And I was okay with leaving that. and someone we missed off our 25 and under list, and I was very upset looking back at it.
Oh,
we said we were gonna. Yeah, I said we were gonna miss
Mm-hmm.
guys on this list, and then I looked at it and I was like, Jalen Johnson wasn't on our list. I hate myself. But of course, that wasn't the one anybody talked about. It was like Brock Purdy should be way higher.
You didn't even have him on your list.
I know that was probably too hot of a take, but I also think Jalen Johnson should have been on the list before Brock Purdy.
Yeah, Joe, that was a mistake. Well, that podcast you started off just like, oh, well, obviously neither of us have Brock Purdy, and I'm like you were surprised I had it on the list.
I don't know. I guess he could have been 20 to 25.
Yeah, what I mean, realistically, if we're not taking positional value into account, he's like definitely not on the list. But of course, positional value is going to come into account even when we say it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's move on. Let's go to my team, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'll go here. I think it's Zion McCollum. I just think that Todd Bowles likes him. Todd Bowles trusts him. He knows a lot more about defense than I do. But I thought he had a really rough year too. I thought he played all right when he was playing safety. He's the outside corner. They have not really gone out and gotten another guy there. You have. I don't know if they're trying to transition someone into like outside corner because you added Tevier Thomas, who's a slot guy. They have Christian Izien, who has been like a solid slot guy. They went out and drafted a slot corner, Tyke Smith. So they're good on slot corner. I don't know if one of these guys is going to be an outside guy. Losing Carlton Davis, I'm scared, Kyle.
Yeah, I would agree with it. I mean, look, I think it is an important position, and they've been kind of gutted. I mean, you look at what that Super Bowl roster was with Sean Murphy-Bunting and Carlton Davis to what it is now, and it's definitely a problem position. It's something that's definitely going to be a worrisome spot. And you haven't been the biggest fan of him, and she just shook randomly for absolutely no reason. So, you haven't been the biggest fan, and I think a lot of it has some validity. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it works out. I did have him too on my list, so I think it's worthy pick. And I agree with you. I trust Todd Bowles a lot to figure this out, but I do think I'm not really seeing the vision right now.
Wait, as in you had him TWO on your list or TOO on your list?
TOO.
Okay, gotcha. He was also okay. Got it. Well, I wasn't sure if you meant like you had someone ahead of him. Gotcha. Yeah. I don't know. And the frustrating thing is this secondary would be so good with another outside corner. Like I said, there's plenty of slot guys. Jordan Whitehead's back and he fits that scheme so well. Obviously, Antoine Winfield, Jamal Dean is good. Like it's just you have Levante David who can help out the coverage unit. It's tough. You could also go with maybe an edge rusher because I think that's looking a little bit tough as well. I like Yaya Diaby a bit, but not as much as Buccaneers fans like him because he was one of those high sack guy, which, hey, he fits the scheme well, all that stuff. But, yeah, I think that the defense could be tough. Was there anyone else you thought of?
I was kind of in the same boat. I looked at Diaby, Tryon Shulenka, is it Randy Gregory maybe? Kalijah Cansey too, another guy they drafted. And the only other position I thought too, kind of similar to the, lesser extent of Jason Kelsey, but similar stature is Graham Barton. And I think the biggest thing too, like you said, like Philadelphia at least has a lot of really good offensive linemen. Like, I don't think it's a guaranteed thing that this Tampa offensive line is going to be great outside of Tristan Wirfs next year.
Yeah, I think I like Luka Decky as well. I know he only had one good year, but I trust the tackle situation, but that interior is question mark. Kyle, I'm a little nervous when I go through the Buccaneers roster. I'm not going to lie.
I mean, look, you got a lot of good things at important positions, right?
Yeah, that's the thing.
You're good at you got good safety, good corner. You got a elite safety. Honestly, you got two really good receivers. It's not too much different from last season, right? I mean, obviously, you want guys like Shaq Barrett, you want that other corner, but I still think there's some decent pieces here.
Yeah, we'll see. When we do our preview, we'll get more into it. But let's go to the New Orleans Saints. Where did you go with your pick for them?
I really struggled with this team.
Me too.
I don't know. I ended up just putting Trevor Penning because it doesn't sound like Ryan Ramczyk's going to be ready to play to start the year, I guess. And I just didn't really know where to go. I kind of feel like I know everybody on this team. Like Kamara's and Jamal Williams or whatever. I'm not picking a running back for most important player. Chris Olave's fine. I guess you could argue, like, can Rashid Shaheed or someone be like a consistent second guy? But I don't really think it's that big of a thing. And I just look at this offensive line and think, like, I don't love a lot of the pieces here, especially if Ramczyk isn't healthy. So I had Penning on the list. Like, but the thing is, like, I just think it's not a very good offensive line regardless. But, it could be him. It could be Fuaga. I think it's an interesting piece there.
Yeah, for everything you just said is why I put Fuaga on my as my pick. But yeah, that's kind of what I went with as well. There doesn't seem to be a big thing to move the needle. The only other thing I did consider Derek Carr on the list as well, which I try to not do quarterbacks if I can avoid it. But like, I guess I will say like he ended the season a lot stronger than he played for most of the year last year, and I guess the hope if you're a Saints fan is like, did it just take him some time to get the scheme down? And will he have kind of a bounce back year? See, that's the correct use of bounce back, Kyle. A bounce back year toward in next season. I possibly.
Yeah, I mean, look, 12 touchdowns and 1 interception last 4 weeks of the year. Definitely did play better. I agree with that, and was probably healthier too. So, it's definitely a case. And I think, it's going to come down to, are you going to rely on potentially a Jake Haener or Spencer Rattler coming in this season? I think it's a tall ask too, so he does kind of have to play well and stay healthy.
Do they have a case for the most boring team, the Saints? Or I don't think they can be, right? They talk too much trash.
Well, Dennis Allen coaches the team, so probably.
Yeah, it's tough. It's if you're not paying close attention, they're interesting to watch, but not. You won't hear about like Stephen A. Smith will not mention the New Orleans Saints next year.
Probably not. And they're going to be like just bang average too. Is Dennis Allen the most boring coach besides Kevin O'Connell, who just has the mantle? Because I haven't heard that guy talk in his multiple years of coaching.
Yeah, Kevin O'Connell's a good one. Kevin O'Connell's up there as well. I think I was gonna say Raheem Morris, but no, Raheem Morris is not. He had some wild quotes when he was with Tampa Bay. I think I think Raheem Morris now is going to be the guy because he's not going to say anything after some of his press conferences in Tampa Bay.
How it went last yeah, that could be the case. Yeah, I don't know. I think it just feels weird because we've all been like, this is not a good coaching situation. This is not a very good roster, and they just keep bringing it back. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. It's like the definition of insanity to me. Like, you're just doing the same thing that nobody actually wants. Like, which Saints fan looked at the Dennis Allen coaching situation and looked at this roster and the performance last year and said, "Run it back, baby, let's go"? Who said that? I want to know that fan, and I want to hear their explanation for this because I really just don't get it.
Yeah, it's a weird move. I mean, I guess you could say they made a move. They got Derek Carr 2 years ago.
Right, but it didn't work last year. That was my point. Like, the biggest thing they did this year was Chase Young, who's probably not even going to start for this team. And then they drafted Fuaga. Like, I don't know if I'm excited about anything. Like, I just don't get it. I questioned it a lot. Like, this felt like a classic blow-it-up team. Like, why is Lattimore and Demario Davis and Cameron Jordan still on this team?
It's a fair question. Probably because they can't afford to get rid of him with the contract situation. They might be in trouble there, but because everyone's been pushed down the road. But let's move on to you mentioned. Yeah. I don't understand what this team is doing. Let's go to another team. We don't fully understand what they're doing. The Atlanta Falcons, who obviously got a lot of heads scratched when they drafted Michael Penix Jr. Several ways you could go with them. I think Kirk Cousins would be an easy pick for them. I decided to go Kyle Pitts just because, like, I feel like we have seen flashes of him looking really good and maybe removed from the Arthur Smith scheme. Could we see a new Kyle Pitts? It's possible. So he was, I think Drake London was actually pretty good with Arthur Smith. I don't, but he's the guy who I decided to go with, Kyle Pitts.
I would agree with that. I think it's a really nice pick. Actually, not even one I considered. So, I think that is a good pick, and it makes a lot of sense. It feels like it would be the time for him to kind of get better and take that lead. Now that you can't make the quarterback excuse for him anymore, right? You can't make the coaching excuse for him anymore. It's down to him. So I think it is going to be a fascinating year for Kyle Pitts, and I could see him having a huge breakout year. So I do agree with that. I did take the easy answer. I took Kirk Cousins. This team clearly felt like they were a quarterback away from something. And I don't know what was.
Like they were two quarterbacks away.
Well, look, I don't know what there is to understand. not understand. They just took the 24-year-old rookie quarterback as their, kind of backup plan, their quarterback of the future. So in 4 or 5 years, he'll be ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see the dislogic to it. But no, I mean, I think it is a question. I think it just comes down to they felt like they were a quarterback away from something, and I think Kirk Cousins puts them in the driver's seat. Like this team not winning the division is a failure, right? Like that's just failure of a season. And yeah, I mean that's just what it's down to. And it comes down to Kirk Cousins elevating this offense to the level that they expect it to be, because they've invested a lot in this. We've been over that a lot of times. They've invested a lot in these skill position guys. It comes down to that. They felt like the quarterback was holding them back, and now they have the quarterback. So let's see if it works.
Yeah, and I have some real concerns about the Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles injury thing. Like I feel like that's like not really getting talked about a ton. He is still only 35 though. So I guess like if that doesn't affect him too much, like he could still have several years left to play. Again, when do they want to transition to Michael Penix? I don't know. But there's some defensive concerns you could look at as well with this roster, but again, I think the offense and how good they can be is the real question mark.
Yeah. I agree. I considered a couple defensive guys, like, I don't know. Obviously, Jesse Bates was Defensive Player of the Year candidate, honestly. And I thought he was really good, and Grady Jarrett's good. But, like, you could bring up, like, Arnold Ebiketie, Zach Harrison, stuff like that. There's a couple interesting pieces, but I think it's just down to the offense for this team. They're built to win on offense.
Let's go to the final NFC South team, the Panthers, who aren't built to win anywhere. I mean, this is Bryce Young is the answer.
Yeah. This was the easiest one, and this was, I think, is my last quarterback taken. Yeah, it's my last quarterback taken. So, listen, they drafted him a developmental coach. They added some offensive weapons for him. You got to see progress. It doesn't have to be awesome, but you have to see progress, and that's probably all you're asking for, because this team's not going to win a lot of football games. They're probably going to win less than 6. But you have to look competitive on offense, and you have to look competitive at the quarterback position to have hope. And that's where the Panthers are at. So, yeah, it's Bryce Young.
How good does Bryce Young have to be? Let's say Caleb Williams is like a Pro Bowl quarterback. How good does Bryce Young have to be for Panthers fans to not be up at night saying, what have we done with this draft pick?
For the health of Panthers fans, I hope they're no longer looking at this is comparing Bryce Young to CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
Now, from the fans' perspective, you're going to,
right.
And it sucks. But I hope from the fans' perspective, you would just have to look at, is he getting better? Is there a pathway to this guy being like a top 12 quarterback in the NFL? Because if you're just looking at him compared to CJ Stroud, you're going to lose every time, and you're just going to be unhappy. And then Caleb Williams, we'll see, but I'm obviously very optimistic. It's very hard to see the situation where it looks good for them. I just think you have to get to the point where, can we at least play a few years with Bryce Young and be happy with it? I think that's what you have to look at. Otherwise, you're probably just done for.
Yeah, and the one thing someone brought up Xavier Legette. That was actually someone I kind of considered as well. But the one thing I will say about Young is, I brought it up before, but it's the Tua thing. Year one, how the hell did the Dolphins draft Tua over Justin Herbert? And while I still think that most people would rather have Herbert than Tua, the gap is certainly closed, and I don't think Dolphins fans are up at night thinking, why the hell did we do that? So there is still hope, but yeah, it's looking, they really need to see improvements, because if not, then it's just time to move on.
Yeah, it's a weird team, isn't it?
Yeah,
like even beyond just the obviously the missed quarterback situation, thinking about that, like there's just a whole like smorgasbord of like terrible draft picks. Like Terrace Marshall Jr. still on this team. Jonathan Mingo last year wasn't great. And then you got like your random, you got your huge money guys and like Robert Hunt. And then you have Derek Brown, obviously, who's very good. And then outside of that, it's like, I don't know. It's just such a weird team. You got like a bunch of random veterans just scattered through this roster. Josie Jewell's on this roster. I didn't even know Josie Jewell still played football. Kalavion Chaison's on this roster. Like, it's just wild. Like, I just go through this team like, who the hell did this? This is like, someone, didn't realize what the salary cap was when playing Madden. And it's like, oh, wait, I have to sign 10 rostered players and I only have $6 million.
Right.
Like, let me just figure this out as best as I can. It's just wild. Look at this team. This is a joke. This is insulting.
Yes, it's tough. It's difficult with the Panthers. So if Bryce Young plays better, that makes it less difficult. Let's go to the Rams. Kyle, I went for a bit of an outside the box pick with the Rams, or maybe it's not. I don't know, but I went Tre'Davious White. They went out and signed Tre'Davious White to a contract. Hopeful he can reach his potential. They added Darius Williams back, who I think should be good for them. But that other corner position is still a big question mark for me. And I think that their secondary was a real weakness last year. If they can get a good Tre'Davious White season, that changes this team in a big way.
Yeah, it does. And it's the same reason I had the same player.
There you go.
So it's interesting because, like, I think it'd be very easy to look at this team and say the most important players are Jared Verse or who's the other rookie that might play? There's somebody else.
Braden Fisk.
Yeah, Braden Fisk, right? One of those guys has to help, another one where we're replacing Aaron Donald in the aggregate as much as we can.
Mm-hmm.
But this feels like a schematic change, right? Like, they clearly figured that they're going to try and get better in the secondary because there's just no replacing Aaron Donald. Like, I think they got some good players. I liked Verse in the draft. I liked Kobe Turner last year. Obviously, he was fantastic. But it just felt like they decided that they're going to kind of change things up, and they loaded up on secondary. There's a lot of secondary players on this roster too, just looking at the depth chart. And so they're trying to make this work, it seems like, on that end rather than trying to replace Donald more so. And you know what? If Jared Verse is really good, it's a bonus. And I think he could be very good. And I think he could have a fantastic rookie season. But I just don't think they're looking at it as like, how are we replacing Aaron Donald rather than how are they making this defense better? And I think they did.
I hear you. Another guy I considered on the offensive side. What about Cooper Kupp? Just like, can he stay healthy?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen what both of these receivers can do individually, right? Like, we saw Puka Nacua last year. Cooper Kupp at his absolute best, helped him win a Super Bowl, was the Super Bowl MVP, all that kind of stuff. But if we put all these pieces together, like, this is a pretty fascinating roster. Like, Kyron Williams has obviously had a great year too, and like, I think Blake Corum was probably one of the more NFL ready running backs, just because I just think he's a good football player. He's not like a developmental prospect at all because there's not really physical tools to develop. So I just think it's like a team that's like offensively, like, if you put it all together, it's a really fascinating group. We just need to see it all together. We want to see Stafford healthy. We want to see Kupp healthy. And all that put together could be a really dynamic football team on that end.
Yeah. We have Kieran in the chat saying, how does one replace 99? You don't, Kieran. It's what we're saying in the aggregate.
In the aggregate. One does not simply walk into Mordor,
Yeah. Let's move on. Kyle, who do you have for the Seahawks?
Another one I kind of struggled with a little bit. I feel like there's a couple different answers here, but I ended up just going with Charles Cross. Like, we've kind of talked about this, they drafted these two tackles together and they're going to let these guys develop. And they've been, okay to bad, I would say, at their very best. And I think we kind of need to see it with Charles Cross now, right? This is the make or break year because, this should be a better offense than what it was last year. And I think you could, criticize the play calling for certainly. I think Geno Smith had a little bit of a regression too. I think some of that stuff's fair, but I also think like the offensive line didn't play that well either. So I think that's probably the biggest like individual player fix would be the offensive line rather than the whole piece. Because I still think it should be a more talented offense than what it was last year.
Yeah, I guess I understand it. I kind of think the offense is just going to be like solid next year. Like, I'm kind of just expecting like a solid unit as a whole. But with the the new coaching regime, I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on cornerback play. And so I decided to go Tariq Woolen. as someone who might get a lot more stress on. I think has shown flashes of being great, and as a whole has been pretty solid.
Yeah.
Like giving him a lot more pressure. I'm interested in seeing how he works in this situation.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point too. I did think about him because I thought year one, the 6 interceptions I think did him a disservice because everyone all of a sudden was like, "This is the future franchise corner,"
Hmm.
and I don't, he wasn't that good year one. He was pretty good though, and he did get the 6 interceptions, so you do have to give him the credit for that. But then Devin Witherspoon was just blew him away last year, and at the same team. And I think he also kind of regressed. And it wasn't just the interception regression. I think his play regressed too. So I think that is an interesting position. And he was probably the one other guy I considered. And, I think he could be very good. I think he could be very good. And in that Ravens defense is something that breeds corners. And maybe it helps him kind of find that consistency.
Yeah, or maybe it goes the other way, and maybe it's too difficult of a scheme, and he struggles. Like we've seen that happen before.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Did you think about Geno at all with this team?
No, I just kind of think I know who Geno Smith is, right?
Yeah, we said that before though, and then took that big leap. So I guess you never know.
Yeah, he's probably somewhere between who he was 2 years ago and where he was last year, right?
Yeah, I think so. Which isn't that big of a jump, but yeah, probably. Someone also mentioned whoever Bobby Wagner's replacement is. Yeah, that's gonna be tough to replace as well. But let's move on. Let's go to the Arizona Cardinals. We have 2 teams left. For the Cardinals, I just want Marvin Harrison Jr. It's kind of similar to the Malik Neighbors thing of like, I kind of think this team's going to struggle no matter what they are able to hit. But you know what?
Mhm.
Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, that's a fun, even if that's a bad team still, that's a fun bad team.
Yeah, I think it is going to be fun. I'm at least going to tune into Cardinals games for sure, right?
Yeah.
So I think it could be very interesting. Plus, like even guys like Zay Jones as their third receiver, I think Zay Jones is a pretty good player. Like I don't think it's that bad at all, and I think it's a pretty interesting offense that could be pretty good. Which is why I went to the defense, because I don't think it could have got any worse at cornerback play last year. Maybe besides if they called Washington and asked for a couple guys. I went Sean Murphy Bunting because you're at least I think you're at least trying to say let's get a little bit better at the position because we were just so bad. Let's not worry about trying to get a developmental piece in there. Let's just get a guy who we know is at least has a baseline level of competency, and you at least want to see competent play back there because it was bad.
Yeah, Murphy Bunting's still young. He'll be 27 by the time of next season. Remember when Washington tried to cover Tyreek Hill one-on-one last year? What were they doing? That was a mess. This is you're right. It's really tough. I guess my thing is like this coverage unit still stinks even if Sean Murphy Bunting's good.
I agree. Like it is, but at least you could be like I don't know, like you could at least like win like 6-7 games if the secondary is a little bit better, right? Like it's not going to be like a top like 20 group, but if it's not like bottom 3, like you could at least like say you're going to win. Maybe there's a scenario where the Cardinals do win 7 or 8 games, and this offense is awesome, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is like a Rookie of the Year candidate.
Yeah, I think they need other guys to step up. I don't know if it's like Garrett Williams or Catrell Clark, a couple guys they drafted last year in 2023. Like if I don't know who it is, but I think it's not just enough if Murphy Bunting and I mean they drafted Max Milton in round 2 this year. Maybe he's a guy too. They need more. All I'm saying is they need more than just Sean Murphy Bunting to step it up. I do agree with your main point though. It's like if this coverage can just be okay, it completely changes things.
Yeah. Or just bad, just don't be horrible. You can't be horrible at anything in the NFL because teams just spam it.
Yeah. Teams are not gonna say, "Oh, you're struggling there." It's not like in the wrestler where it's like, "Oh, you have a hurt shoulder." Like, I won't hit you there too hard. Like, no, that's not what NFL teams are doing.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So they're just gonna attack that, and this team was competitive at times last year, and I think it kind of waned a little bit as the year went along, but. I do think they compete, and I do think that's what Jonathan Gannon's going to lean on is that they did compete last year at times, and I do think there needs to be incremental growth for a guy who was a defensive coach. They gave up a lot of points. Not all of it was his fault because they didn't have the roster, but you at least have a little bit more of the roster now.
Yeah. Final team to talk about, the team that was so close to winning a Super Bowl, lost in overtime in the Super Bowl. Kyle, who did you pick for their most important player for the 2024 season?
So in truth, I think the answer to this is Jawan Jennings.
Interesting.
Because, I mean, it sounds like Ayuk's, I don't know, this sounds weird, right? Like, the whole viral, like, phone call thing, and, like, Ayuk's not going to be there. So, I don't know if Ricky Pearsall is going to be ready to be wide receiver 2 day 1, and so you kind of need that option. I think you do need this option on this offense. The whole thing with this offense is the variety of talent. So I was thinking that, but because Ayuk's still on the team, I didn't pick it. Because I still want to see if he ends up actually getting traded. And I went with Javon Hargrave because, like, he was okay last year. I thought he was solid at times, but they didn't pay him to be okay and solid. Like, they paid him to have the best defensive line in the NFL by far. And it just wasn't the best defensive line in the NFL by far. It was, it was a pretty good defensive line, but they paid for the best, and they didn't get the best last year. And I think he's kind of the first guy I think needs to play a little bit better, because it felt a lot like Nick Bosa or bust on the defensive line last year, especially as the playoffs went along and they saw all those good passing attacks. And that's something I just think has to get better.
That's an interesting one. I do think they got a little better once Chase Young went there, and that's actually why my pick was Leonard Floyd, for kind of a similar thing to what you're saying, though, of like that defense. They put so much resources into the defensive line, kind of has to be really good. Also, Yetur Matos could be a choice there, but yeah, I agree. Hargrave, if he can step it up, I guess the concern is, the guy's now on the wrong side of 30. Is he going to start getting better? But maybe it just took some time. So I think that's a good choice. And defensively, they're pretty good other than that, right? Like, this good secondary, even with the Dre Greenlaw injury, Devondre Campbell, like, that's a pretty great, like, backup linebacker now for that situation. Let's circle back to the receiving core, because you brought up Jawan Jennings. I guess, I don't know. Maybe I'm just delusional. I don't know. I'm just assuming Brandon Ayuk's gonna play for the 49ers next year, and I could be wrong. But I'm kind of just waiting until I see that happen. I'm not gonna make a pick on a podcast about it.
Yeah, and that's eventually why I decided not to do it. But I do think it is an interesting thing where, if he ends up actually getting traded, like, then I think that's the very obvious answer to me, because I do think that depth of talent is what their advantage is. And I mean, Brandon Ayuk's the number one receiver on, it feels like probably 20 NFL teams. He just happens to be on one of the
more. Yeah.
It might be higher, honestly. Yeah. So it's just, he might be the number one receiver on this team, to be honest. Like, they just use Deebo Samuel in a lot of different ways.
I think he just is. I don't think it's might. I think at least last year he was.
Yeah. So it's just a very weird situation. And I just can't imagine, unless he's going full Antonio Brown, I can't imagine why I would trade him. Like, I just don't get it. Or, the whole thing with the phone conversation of saying they don't even want me. Like, I just don't get it. I don't understand the situation there.
Yeah, it's a bit weird. They did with the DeForest Buckner. They're a team that's willing to get rid of a player if they feel like they have. Like, DeForest Buckner, they traded for a first round pick, and they were, they got the money for it, and they used that pick to draft Javon Kinlaw. And that's why you don't trade a star player. That's exactly why. Like, that's the perfect reason. Don't get me wrong. I think trading away players right when they start. Actually, I think there's a lot of logic behind, like, trading a guy like Brandon Ayuk once he gets to this spot of you're now starting to pay him more, but teams still value the age. Like, there's a lot of logic in that. I just think that Brandon Ayuk, when you're getting a debatably elite wide receiver, is so hard to come by. I don't think you get rid of him. But who knows? Maybe the San Francisco scheme helps him out.
Yeah. It very much could be. Like, it is interesting. That's just what I thought about through that process. And, if they lose him, like, I don't know. I don't think it's as good as a receiving core, honestly. And I think it's a problem area all of a sudden. But he's still on the team, so I left that off. I agree with you, though, on Leonard Floyd. He was somebody else I considered along with Hargrave. I also thought about Drake Jackson, Yetur Matos too. Just kind of that can they get more sustainable pass rush? I also thought about Talanoa Hufanga, just because I think the defense got way worse when he got hurt. But that also felt like, a health dependent thing, which is really what we were kind of trying to avoid. But I just think those are a few interesting candidates for this team.
Did you think about Brock Purdy at all?
No, I mean, we know who he is, and he's on a good team. This is nitpicking a team that's probably going to win 12, 13 games. So,
yeah,
I don't think they had this many problem areas, really. Unless they do trade Ayuk, then I guess.
Yeah, this should be pretty good. Kyle, do you have any thoughts? Or first, let them know we can find us on Twitter before we head out.
Make sure to follow us on Twitter. That is at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Gronin. And make sure to follow the account page at On the Sideline JK. That is at On the Sideline JK.
Of course, if you like audio-only podcast, anywhere you get your audio podcast, just search On the Sideline Podcast. It should be available there. We'll be back normal time next week at Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Sorry for the moving things around. Thanks for dealing with us as we did that. Kyle, I got to get your thoughts on the NBA Finals.
Not quite as climactic as we wanted it to be, I would say. I think it's kind of weird era for the NBA for sure. And I think a lot of the casuals are being turned off at times. I think a lot of it has to do with scheduling, honestly. They spread this thing out so much. Like, it's hard to build that much anticipation with like 4 days rest. But anyway, besides the point. Boston was a better team. And they out executed, and I just thought the media aspect of it was the part that cracked me up the most, because it was like the whole Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown thing, which has gone on for years, just unnecessarily, I think. They're both really good. That's kind of where I'm at. And I still think Jason Tatum's better, but regardless. And then the whole, like, the Luka conversation that happened. And, like, yes, like, his defense isn't great. But at the same time, like, if you look at all the numbers, like, Dallas's defense as a whole defended Boston better than anybody in the playoffs, and basically way below their regular season totals. And it kept being brought up to the Dallas defense. They defended Boston well enough to win games. The problem is that Boston's defense was stifling Dallas's offense. And, the role guys who, if you look at the Oklahoma City series, hit a bunch of shots, and that's why they won that series. They weren't hitting shots in this series. Kyrie was bad this series. And, I mean, Luka was really the only sustainable offense, honestly. And it just felt like if guys aren't going to hit shots, if Kyrie is not going to play, good enough, that's kind of the difference between this team winning and losing a championship. And Boston was better, and they out-executed. And all that stuff could have gone right, and they still lost the series. But the fact that it didn't go right and the conversation was Luka's defense, I thought that was just weird.
Yeah, well, basketball is just so weird, where it's like you always have to blame the losing team's best player when things go wrong, like every time. Like, that's always what cost them. It's odd.
Yeah,
Kyle, you talk about what's turning off casual fans. I'm a casual fan. I tune in to Game 3. Oh wow, it's a close game. Mavericks trying to get back in the series, and then this stupid couple ticky-tacky penalties on Luka. And it's like, now he's out of the game. It's like, okay, well, this is not. Why is your sport set up this way? This is stupid.
Yeah. I mean, it is a conversation to have. Frankly, like, as a Mavericks fan, just to stress to everybody, I'm a Mavericks fan who likes the other Boston sports teams. I didn't grow up a Celtics fan. It's a long story. I'm not going to get into it. But anyway, Mavericks fans, I've had season tickets the last 3 years. If I was to criticize Luka for any game, Game 3 is the game I criticize him for. Because I think 100% the officiating got into his head, and I think they were ticky-tack fouls, but I think they were fouls because he was throwing a temper tantrum that game. And that was the one game I think you could actually criticize him for, because I thought he threw a tantrum and let it get to his head and got him out of the game. What I didn't like in that game, for the officiating perspective, was they let all this sort of physicality go throughout this series. They talked about it so much, how many guys are getting hit in the paint and all that kind of stuff. And that was what was talked about. And then all of a sudden, Dallas gets a rebound down 3 with like 2 minutes left. And they called like a moving screen on a play where a guy barely moved at all, if he even moved at all. And they called it a moving screen and turned the ball over and gave it back to Boston up 3 with 2 minutes left. And that was one I was just like, okay, like what that just felt like the referees wanted to get involved more than they needed to.
Yeah, just in general, the NBA, the officiating, it's just I really think they have to start letting more stuff go. I think it's really kind of ruining the viewer experience.
It's I think it's become the hardest sport to officiate.
Uh-huh.
Because I think a lot of guys are taking advantage of it, and a lot of guys have learned how to draw fouls and flop
Then
and commit
penalize that.
fouls,
They make that a penalty.
but they've tried that and it hasn't worked.
And
I
then what
think
they do?
I mean they've tried flopping fines, they've tried flopping technicals, they've
No,
tried
you
flopping.
have to like it's what the I think you have to make it like a real like a hard like I guess technical wouldn't be bad, but like make it. I think you have to really crack down hard on it.
Yeah.
Like make it like
Well,
a suspension.
so the problem is they started flopping technicals this year, and then
Okay.
like the very first game, they called Jalen Brunson for a flopping technical in a Knicks Celtics game, and it very
Mhm.
much was not a flop.
Okay.
And then everyone went crazy over that, and so they stopped calling flopping technicals. Like, it's just like, okay, it's the most reactionary referee crew probably in any sport, and I just think it's incredibly hard because it's probably the fastest game in the world at this point besides hockey, and a lot of the contact is marginal at best, and it's really hard to tell what the marginal contact is and what it isn't at this point.
Yeah, these things are impossible to officiate. Like that's also it's no one. It's impossible to get it right. I don't like. I think the refs are great. I just think that it's like I just think they have let more stuff go.
So they started doing that. Like if you basically look at the statistics from All-Star break on compared to pre-All-Star breaks, fouls
Okay.
across the board were way down. Free throws across the board were way down. But I think they can go even further. I agree.
Hmm. Yeah, and maybe there just needs to be an adjustment period too. Did you have any thoughts on hockey? You said you weren't going to watch.
Yeah, I haven't watched. I'm not watching the Antichrist win the championship. So I'm not going to be happy for that team. I'm not going to congratulate that team. I don't even want to see that team celebrate. They're 12 Sunrise Florida fans. Where do they do the parade for Sunrise Florida? Are they just going to pretend now that they're actually Miami and do it in Miami, or are they just going to try and actually just drive around the block in Sunrise?
You got to do it. Got to do it at the mall. That everyone perks at when you go to the game. You got to do it at the mall.
Yeah.
Just
How
have it.
would
Just
they
have it in the
just
mall.
drive it around the mall? That'd be so
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, I think so.
All their fans, we're not Miami, bro. And then they're going to have their winning parade in Miami. Like, they're going to have to drive through Miami to go to their parade. Like, just a bunch of losers.
Well, you can't do it at the stadium. There's too much traffic. You can't get through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Florida is hockey central all of a sudden.
Oh, my gosh. I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
I'm sick of it. But no, those are over. Been watching a lot of baseball. Been watching Euros 2024. Except for what U.S. TV markets want to put on Fubo TV for some reason, which is just the dumbest thing ever. That's basically what I've been watching.
Chat, I'm just as lost as you are.
There's a few people who understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Listen to this though. Listen to how crazy this is. So Fox won the broadcasting rights to the European 2024 championships. They've had it for multiple years. They are putting some of the earliest games of the day exclusively on Fubo TV so they can broadcast fishing on Fox Sports 1, bass fishing. And so like there was a game this morning that was Turkey against Georgia. The countries obviously. And
yes, not the bird versus the state. Got it.
Yeah. And it was one of the best games of the tournament. Some of the goals were incredible in that game too, and it was all this awesome stuff. Fubo TV. Nobody watched it in the United States. Nobody got to watch it.
Yeah, it reminds me of back when NBC had rights to the hockey playoffs, and there was a game on the Golf Channel.
Yeah, putting it on Versus. Remember when we had to go find Versus to watch hockey playoffs? Just unbelievable.
Yeah, I think that was tough. Let's get out of here. Any final thoughts?
No, let's get out of here. I'm done.
All right. Okay. Thank you to everybody. We do appreciate it. We'll see you Wednesday, as of not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. So be on the lookout for that. And until then, have a good one.
Peace.